everyone I know who has tried InDesign, for instance, has succeeded. And I think self-belief has got a lot to do with it. I think if you believe in yourself and you work hard, then you will do well.
What was the tipping point for you to start your own company? When were you like, okay, that's it, now it's my own business only?
I think for me, as I mentioned before, I used to work for a company called Lemonade Money, which is like an MTV production company, mostly focused on like music content, documentaries for like and short films for like Channel 4. For me, I started as an intern, then they hired me as a head production assistant, so I dropped out of uni, and then I went to be junior camera ops, then studio manager, then I hit a glass ceiling. Because I was like, they're hiring in a bunch of directors, producers, all this stuff. I'm not going to get a look in. I'm just going to be assisting. So once you hit that point, I think for me, I was like, I can see it. I can feel it. I'm not going any higher. I need to start my own thing. Because there's also a way that I think the industry should be and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, for me personally, I need to figure out how that can happen. There's no way. You have to kind of take the dive. For me personally, I think it makes sense to take the dive early, so that you make your mistakes and do whatever you got to do, and then like learn from that and move on from that kind of thing. I think that thought process of being like, this is as far as I'm gonna go as a 22-year-old, when back then, I was like, I'm not getting any higher right now, so I need to start making my own content, working with my peers. Like for me, I was part of the community that I wanted to shoot. So I was part of the cultures that I wanted to shoot. So I was like, well, why don't I just shoot them? And like, I learned all these skills from this company. So why don't I take those skills and adapt them to what it is I'm doing? And then I decided, fuck it, let's just make a company. So the moment that I realized I have to incorporate or register my company was, I was in a meeting at Channel 4, and they were like, we really want you to do a mini series type thing. And they asked me, have you got a company? And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Like, sort of thing. And then I realized that they don't actually work with anyone that they won't let you manage an entire project unless you're an incorporated company. Do you know what I mean? So you have to be registered. And I was like, okay, so I have to do it. And it didn't really make, until that moment where Channel 4 said to me, yo, you need to have a company in order for us to work with you, didn't even come to my mind to actually have a company. Not really anyway, not legitimately. And then I was like, yeah, that was my tipping point for me anyway.
Cool. What about you, Tom?
I completely agree about that glass roof. And I think one of the most important pieces of advice I was ever given is to manage upwards as well as down. So I think, especially when you're a creative person, you walk in and you can get frustrated with the people above you because they can't necessarily see your vision. And managing upwards and ensuring that you can get them to see that, or you can alter them in some way. And then you do hit this glass roof where you're kind of going, you know, some people work in their jobs not because they're passionate about it, but because they want to pay a bill. And at which point you then decide, do you know what, this is time for me to do it. I did it by kind of consciously falling on my own sword. And I think it is a really thing, you know, it is kind of one of those things where it's like jumping into a cold pool, just do it. And yeah, just do it. You'll know, man, you'll know, you'll just do it. Yeah.
Cool. So the three of us are now running successful businesses. You make a living from what you love. That's what's the most important, right? Can you think about any mistakes you wish you would have avoided, especially for young entrepreneurs that want to set up their own company?
Yeah, a lot. Understand money, number one. Understand money and have a good accountant, okay? Like a real quick bit of advice, use QuickBooks, use Xero, understand how to use them and use them from day one, and understand where your money is, understand how much money you spend on everything, because whether you like to do it or not, and I think this is one of the misconceptions, it's like, I have my own business, I do what I love. Yeah, I do what I love, and at the same time I also have to ensure that all the numbers are balanced and we have to do all the tax returns, and there's a lot of that stuff that you have to deal with. So I think that's a really, really key thing. And I guess another big thing is understanding who you work with, and it is very easy to get engrossed into working with people, and when you do so on a formal agreement, especially if you have a relationship, like a friendship with them, understand them in a work context, and specifically understand them in the work context that you want to work with them in. And what I mean by that is that one of the guys I currently work with, I've worked with him twice in 2 different scenarios. One was an absolute headache, which was within kind of more of a hospitality field. He actually works in UX, and he's a very, very corporate person, so he's very boxed in the way that he works. And in the previous incarnation, it was very difficult, and actually we kind of flirted with working with each other, and now we don't. And now I now work with him, and he works with me on Ace and Freak, and it is a welcomed addition, because otherwise we have a room of 6 creatives and no one's corporate, and now it actually complements. So understanding people, understanding money.
I think for me, and it's easy with hindsight to say this, I'm sure if I went back I'd repeat it exactly the same way, but when I set up Adventure Stories, I had to start from scratch and build a client base from nothing. The reason being that in my employed role, it definitely wasn't possible to sort of out of respect for my old employees, because I was friends with them. I even want to take those clients with me, and B, because I want to define Adventure Stories through myself and build up my own client base. From day one, I had to get my own clients, and that was by far the most challenging thing about setting up the business. I think for me, I'm experienced in design, so I've definitely found doing the design part of it the least challenging. But all of the other bits, especially the new business side of it, the going out, meeting clients, all of those roles that were covered by specific specialists when I was working in a large agency are suddenly down to me. I know at the point when I start employing people, the first person I'm going to employ is the person who has the specialism that I am poorest at. I think that's a piece of advice I'd give to anyone. It's advice that's definitely been given to me. So, looking back, I guess I wish I'd worked harder, really sort of like pushing new business even before when I set up, instead of almost having a bit of a hard start, which is what I had in an attempt to hit the ground running. But hey, it is what it is.
You have to take all parts of it, right?
Just to, I suppose, mirror what the guys have been saying already. I think understanding money is really important, but for me, it's in a way that understanding your worth. So it's like, if someone comes to you asking for a piece of content, you might be like bleeding, you might be like, yo, I need to pay rent, all of these things. But understanding that your worth, they actually need you. Okay, so as a creative, people would often diminish our importance all the time. So like it's very difficult to sell someone on why a photo shoot might cost $4,000. It's very difficult for them to understand that as a process, or why you want to pay a model like £500 for a date. They're like, well, it doesn't really make sense to them because they're not from that world. So I think it's important to be able to translate that to them and be like, yo, this is why it's important. End of the day, this is the face of your company for this amount of time, blah, 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 blah. And kind of being able to translate like the business world and the creative world very well. Don't undersell yourself in a way that's like, right, so I know that someone's gonna like pitch me out of this project by only charging, like lowballing you essentially. So I think understanding the power of no is very important. So when someone comes to you and says, you know what, can you do this for this much? Saying no is actually helpful, because they will, more time than not, 80% of the time, will end up coming back being like, you know what, this guy's content or this guy's work is amazing, so I'm actually going to come back and meet his mark. So it's like having your value is like, we're no lesser than the average businessman that works in the industry who fights for their pitches, fights for their budgets, fights for their, do you know what I mean? So it's like, if you put yourself in that mind frame, I reckon, and I'm still learning it, it's not something I've mastered at all, but I think understanding that mindset of being like, right, so what I do is actually important, because I always think of it like this way. If you think of the average person that doesn't really appreciate the creative field, if you took away, and if you say to them, you know what, I'll take away all your magazines, your newspapers, your films, everything all of your creature comforts, that's creative, that's creativity. That's what we do essentially. So it's like, if you took that away, how much is that worth to you? Because otherwise it's just a 9 to 5, back and forth, all that kind of stuff. So that in itself is worth a fuck ton. So make sure you put worth on what it is you actually do, because it's important and it's hard.
Yeah, put worth, and as you all said, learn how to wear many hats, right? Yeah. Cool, so maybe we can see if we have any extra questions from the audience.
Hello, everyone. I just had a quick question regarding one of the advice you gave for young entrepreneurs for accountancy. You said to use Xerox and QuickBook, which are automated apps, software. Well, thank you. So you don't think that you should hire someone for this kind of thing, as it's a bit tricky for someone that don't have the background?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the reason why I suggest you do that is because you can have an accountant or a bookkeeper and you don't know if they're good or not if you don't understand your numbers. And I think that is the most important thing. And if you get something like Xero, you'll get videos explaining it. When you work on it every day, you understand it more. So, for example, you'll understand your cash flow, how much money is coming in, because say if you're doing film, you're paying for your camera equipment, and that you have to pay on the day, or maybe you have 15 days terms, but then your client is going to give you 60-day terms and you've got a gap of 30 days. When you see it on those numbers, it's much easier.
So it's about using the tool first, so you understand, and then when you hire an accountant, you understand his work and you understand if he does a good job. Otherwise, you never know.
That's a cost, right? So if I hire a plumber to fix my sink and I don't understand what it's like when the sink is fixed, I don't know if I've got my money's worth. So it's still a cost to you.
Yeah, that was quite clear actually. Okay, cool. So any other questions from you guys?
So then I'm assuming that none of you have a background in finance, economics, or just like, oh, I'm going to start a business.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta. I mean, I'm not an ex-banker. There's a lot of people. No, I'm not an ex-banker. But yeah, and I did that through. I think the interesting thing is because my background's in hospitality, my background's in bars. I first started understanding numbers when I was counting stock behind a bar. And working out what my gross profit was, and then I was a bar manager, then I was a general manager, then I was an ops manager looking after 5 sites, and it was like, you start to get the numbers, but I don't, they're still just numbers. It's a fictitious thing, and I think this is one thing that I think is really important, is because when you have your own business, those numbers can cause fear in you. And when those numbers cause fear in you, then you can then make bad decisions based upon fear and actually allow that to happen. And it is something that if you can start doing it now, and you can, because actually another thing that I would say in terms of numbers is that before you leave to set up your own business, do your own budgets. It was the first thing I did when I left my previous agency to set up these, was that I set a budget. I knew exactly what my outgoings were. I know what my incomings were. And you can manage your own finances. It's really boring, but it will get you good and put you in a good position so you don't make a bad decision and ruin a good idea?
So I wanted to ask, I don't know if this applies to you, but I know that a lot of creatives have that kind of eternal fear that there's 20 other people standing behind you who are better than you or who can do exactly what you do and more. But I don't know if you go around all day thinking I'm the best, but how do you deal with that fear if you do have it?
I mean, it's a definite reality that for instance, I got told, I remember when I graduated in design, that there were something like 30,000 design graduates that year. There certainly weren't 30,000 jobs. So that definitely put a bit of pressure on me. What I would say to sort of hearten people is everyone I know who has tried in design, for instance, has succeeded. And I think self-belief has got a lot to do with it. I think if you believe in yourself and you work hard, then you will do well. And the rest you don't have to worry about too much. All of those other people will do what they do.
Just to add on top of that, there's something that you mentioned before in your presentation about being nice, right? There's an edge that you can get just by being in the right place at the right time. And whether or not someone else is like twice as good as you or whatever it is, it's about your attitude. So if someone actually wants to work with you, they will work with you. Whether or not there is 10, 15 people behind you that are better than you, it's about whether they want to work with you. End of the day, they could pick the best every time, but they don't want to because it's like, are you going to make my life easier or harder when we do this work? Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I think the main thing is like you were saying, is just like, it's about your attitude, how you work with people, how you deal with people, all that kind of stuff, how you network, how many people you know, also who comes with you. So it's like, what are your assets in terms of being like, right, so when someone wants to hire you for a job, do you come with something else that gives you an edge? Whether that is a team of people, whether that is a certain piece of software, whether that is all these kind of things add to whether they want to work with you because you make their life easier. So I think it doesn't matter if someone's better than you. For real.
Well, thank you so much for coming tonight and sharing your experiences. I hope you inspired our audience tonight.